Good afternoon, second graders. I'm here to talk about Heritage Studies, Chapter 5, Exploring Our Past. Believe it or not, we are already halfway through this chapter, and I wanted to review the first pages of this chapter. So on page 74, we talk about the first Americans. These are people that crossed the continent of Asia, and you can see that by the red arrow on page 74. They crossed Asia onto the North American continent. They became what is known as the first Americans or Native Americans. They come from the Middle East. In the Bible story, it tells us about the Tower of Babel and how people were building that tower almost kind of like in praise to themselves. But God wasn't very pleased about that. So he caused the people to speak different languages. They ended up stopping work on that tower and then scattering across the world. And so we're going to follow that red arrow over to the North American continent. These early Americans, these first Americans, used something called shelters. They also formed something called tribes. These are different groups of people that have their own beliefs, their own culture, and even their own language. They used shelters out of their natural resources that surrounded them. So they could be built out of palm fronds or even trees. When we go on to page 76, we have the Iroquois. This is about a group of people that lived in the northeastern part of the United States, also in Canada. The Iroquois were made up of 5 Indian tribes. They lived in peace and they helped each other. They were farmers. They also hunted and fished the animals in that local area. So they used their natural resources like trees, berries, even deer skins to make their clothing from. Some vocabulary words from this section was wampum. I dare you to say that with me. Wampum. All right, it's made from small beads and it's kind of decorative. There's an example on page 77. They made these small beads called wampum from shells. Oh, that's pretty cool. They traded wampum for the things that they needed. I think that's very pretty. So you see a good example right there on page 77. Another vocabulary word was a longhouse. A longhouse is exactly what it sounds like, a long, narrow home. And they used wooden frames to build it, probably from the trees that surrounded them. Turning over to page 78, we then talk about the Calusa. They lived in the southeastern United States, where Florida, hey, wait a minute, aren't we in Florida right now? They made their houses on the coast, but they were not farmers like the Iroquois. They fished and hunted for their food. The Calusa have been called the shell people. They were known for gathering and using shells. A word from this section here that's good to know is called artifacts. In science, we've been learning about dinosaur fossils and how we can get clues from them to learn more about them. Well, artifacts can be used in the same way. We can get clues from artifacts to learn more about a group of people or an ancient civilization. So objects that are left behind by people from long ago are called artifacts. Sometimes it was jewelry, sometimes it was tools. It could even be pottery from a long time ago. On page 79, we move on to the Mayas. The Mayas are found more in Central America, like Mexico and maybe just a little bit further south. Let's see here, they were a very large group of Native Americans. They lived in Mexico and countries to the south. One vocabulary word to take away from here is ruins. Even today, we can still see examples of their magnificent buildings that they built. They look like giant pyramids. So that a ruin is what is left of a building from long ago. So that's something to know. The Mayas had many skills, actually. They wrote down their language. They invented the idea of zero. They learned how to tell time by stars and even made a calendar. I know I have my calendar in the kitchen, but I'll bet you my calendar probably doesn't look like their calendar. They even made chocolate from beans. So I think we know who to thank for the chocolate. So that's page 79. On page 80, we begin to talk about the explorers that came from Europe. Believe it or not, it was over 1,000 years ago. Leif Erikson heard about a land off to the west that he really wanted to explore. So around the year 1000, he set off from Iceland and Greenland and went west until he ran into Canada. So that was around the year 1000 that he just landed on the coast of Canada. Explorers, that's a vocabulary word we want to take away from this part of the book. Explorers are people who leave their home and move on to different areas to see if maybe they can find something of value like gold, spices, trade. Some people just want to see what the new land is like. So Leif Erikson was one of them. Another one, and I'm pretty sure you've heard his name before, Christopher Columbus. In 1942, he set off on his voyage from Spain, and it took him a long time to cross the Atlantic Ocean. On page 82, you can see an example here. The red arrow with the Viking longboat coming from Greenland is actually Leif Erikson's voyage. The blue arrow to the south is Christopher Columbus. We can see where he landed there in the Bahamas, so just off our coast here in Florida. Another explorer that we hear about, especially here in Florida, is Ponce de Leon. Let's see here, people in Europe soon learned that Columbus had not reached Asia. He had instead reached a land that they had not known about. So this was completely new. People wanted to see it. Let's see here. Other Europeans came to the New World. One of these was Juan Ponce de Leon from Spain. He sailed with Columbus on one of his voyages. Ponce de Leon settled on one of the islands Columbus had found. One day he heard about a wonderful spring that would make old people young again. He sailed northwest hoping to find this spring. He never found it, but he'd found land. He did not know that the land he found was part of a continent. He named the land Florida. Guess what? We live here, right? There were some other explorers that came from Europe, Spain, England, France. The French were interested in trade, which is a way to make money by trading goods like spices or animal furs. They were particularly interested in animal furs. The only downside of this is the Native Americans in Europe had very different cultures. They did not understand one another. Native Americans did not always welcome Europeans, and Europeans didn't always treat the Native Americans well. This problem would become bigger and bigger until it went on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop there. We're going to continue learning this chapter the rest of this week and into next week. It looks like we will have a test, not next week, but the week after. All right, so that's just a recap of the first part of chapter 5. Thanks, boys and girls. I hope you have a great day. Bye.